How's it going, everybody? Hope you're enjoying your day. I'm Eugene. Here we have Josephine and Dan Sandison. If this is your first time joining any sort of MAEKAN session, I'll give you guys a quick rundown of what MAEKAN is, if it's your first time. So MAEKAN's an online publication and community focused on the sights and sounds of creative culture. For us, our aim is to really highlight the interesting movements and personalities shaping creative culture. And it's going far beyond sort of generally what you generally have in the current media landscape. I mean, it goes beyond sort of the superficial conversations that are occurring in social media. It's actually trying to contextualize and put some meaning behind the things that people are doing, why they're doing it, how it impacts us as a culture. And then within that subset, we have our sessions. Our sessions are these thematic online panel discussions that we host about once a month. And for each session, what we do is we try to identify a particular theme or a topic, find people that have done it, that are doing it, or have some sort of experience that can hopefully educate you guys, the people that are attending, hopefully provide some inspiration, answer questions. Because at the end of the day, I think one of the most important things within creative culture is not how it looks at any given point in time. It's just the fact you're actually doing it, going out and trying things and learning from one another. Before we start things off, if this is your first time using Zoom, if you have a question for anybody or just in general, you want to give your 2 cents, there's a little black button at the bottom of your Zoom window to the right of the audio settings label, and it's questions and answers. So if you click that, what pops up is a Q&A window, and you can submit a question. And if you have any issues with Zoom, pop a message in the chat, and hopefully we can answer it for you. So maybe we can start off by having Josephine maybe introduce herself and what she does, and maybe give a little context about how long you've kind of been pursuing your full-time thing.
Cool, sounds good. My name is Josephine Cruz. Hi, everybody. Some of you might know me as JAYEMKAYEM. That's my DJ alias. Yeah, I live in Toronto now. I'm not originally from here. I'm originally from Calgary, which is a smaller city in kind of Canada's Midwest. I work on a bunch of different things out here, but mostly I make my living as a DJ, as a freelance writer, and I also do some, I guess, kind of like marketing consulting type work. And I've been working for myself for about 2.5 years now. Prior to doing that full time, I come from a marketing background. I was working in a corporate marketing role for about 4 years with a company called Shaw. It's a big telecommunications company, very conservative company. So what I'm doing now is quite different.
Thanks for that. And cool, maybe Dan, you can give a little bit of background on yourself and what you're doing currently and how you ended up there.
Yeah, sure. My name is Dan. I edit MUNDIAL, which is a quarterly print publication about football or soccer and the lifestyle surrounding football, the travel, the culture. It's been going for about 4 years, but for 2.5, 3 years of that, it was part-time. I was working for various online platforms, as I'm sure some of you know. About 2 years ago, moved back to the UK and decided to do this full-time, and it's gone from there, and it was kind of developed from that point onwards into more than a full-time gig. It's kind of spend a lot of time on it.
Thanks for that. And I think just to kind of jump right into it, was there any particular point in any of your guys' careers where you're like, I'm kind of sick of this, I need to get out and I need to go do my own thing? And I mean, you had kind of a very immediate reaction to that, Dan. Maybe you can start us off.
Yeah, there was about 12 months of those immediate moments. So I was working for, as you know, like a digital publisher, which was kind of going through a phase of transition. It was transitioning into something that I wasn't particularly happy with, and not something that I wanted to work as, but kind of stuck it out and was living on the other side of the world and kind of tried to learn from it and spent a year there, kind of learning a lot, editorially and commercially. But the time came when it was too much, and the frustration of not having a say in the decisions editorially or stylistically or any of those things became too much. So did you think that there was a point in time where MUNDIAL was going to be your full-time thing? You just weren't sure when it was going to happen? Not particularly. Not at the start of that job. No, it was always kind of like a nice little creative thing that we could do on the side. We could supplement our income slightly with. If we all kind of worked as journalists and in editorial and things, and if there was something that we couldn't that no one else had wanted, or that someone wasn't exploring. We used MUNDIAL to kind of to do that. It was never our goal to make it full time. That kind of, there was 4 of us at the time, and we all sort of reached a similar point with our full time jobs.
Yeah. What about you? Yeah. What about you, Josephine?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Dan. Like, I don't know if there's any one moment where you're kind of like have this wake up call. I think that things like that definitely build over time. For me, as I mentioned, I was working for a telecommunications company that, you know, it's an old company. It's, like I said, they're very conservative in their outlook on a lot of things. It's a family owned company, and the family is still like heavily involved with everything. And yeah, I was kind of brought in to do like a digital marketing role, which is obviously supposed to be like very progressive and very innovative. And I was, you know, coming up with all these different campaigns and things that we should be doing, and basically nothing would ever get approved. And it was just really frustrating because, you know, you're kind of looked at to be an expert, but then people don't really take your opinion seriously. So it was just about probably, I would say, 8 months of, you know, that kind of stuff happening. And I really just had enough. And not to mention, like, not getting real proper credit for your work. You know, you would put all this time into planning campaigns, and then only to see it sort of like taken away from you, and someone else would go and like execute on it. And so I kind of just realized, like, you know, I have all these great ideas. I know that I'm a hard worker and a good thinker. I should really be putting that stuff for myself.
And for both of you, how did you deal with the uncertainty of it all? Like, I think that's the biggest thing that challenges a lot of people that are kind of doing this one thing and they want to go pursue something they're more passionate about. You know, what is there a sense of anxiety that you're overcome with? Like, how do you deal with sort of the mental side of it? Maybe start with you, Dan.
I think at the point where you transfer to doing something that you've wanted to do and it's your thing, there's obviously a huge amount of anxiety, usually financial, but it's completely outweighed by the excitement and the fact that you're making the decisions. In my case, that I get to work with my friends, and we were doing something that we were doing for fun as a job. So that's how you cope with it. It just outweighs it. The fun or the idea that you're being creative on your terms completely outweighs those moments when you're worried about where the next check's coming from.
Yeah, how did you deal with the anxiety?
Oh yeah, how do you deal with uncertainty? I think for me, I have like a little bit different like of a perspective, because you can't control like anything in your life. No matter how hard you try to plan anything out, more often than not, it doesn't go the way that you planned. And I think that around the time in my life when I was making this decision to, you know, try to pursue what I wanted full time, I had already gone through a huge like personal transformation. Like, I can just say it. Like, basically, I got out of like a super long relationship that I was in. And that's like something that you think is going to be a sure thing when you're with someone for like 9 years. You know, my whole life as I knew it, and I had tried to set it up to be a certain way, none of those things were in place anymore. So I didn't have my relationship anymore. I didn't have the home that I'd had anymore. And so that kind of just showed me that uncertainty it's a part of life no matter what you're doing. So you kind of, you know, you can't control everything. So you might as well do something you love while you're going through life that way.
Yeah, and for both of you, do you guys ever feel as though you could have made this transition earlier, or did you think it was the right time?
I think for me, like, I definitely sometimes wish I had done it earlier, but I do think it was kind of good timing. As I mentioned, like, I had gone through that great personal transformation, and one of the biggest things for me is that I was actually living at home with my family at that time. After I had split up with my ex, I moved home with my mom, and that was kind of one of the biggest, like, not having that financial burden of having to pay a lot of rent or a big mortgage really pushed me to be like, okay, this is like the opportunity to try it now. It's like now or never kind of thing. So for me, I think it was good timing.
And what about you, Dan?
Yeah, I agree. It was the right time rather than too early or too late, because I think even the worst jobs I've had, you kind of learn a great deal from it. Like, you learn, even if it's what not to do. You know what I mean? The lessons kind of learned up until this point, I wouldn't have been as well equipped to deal with the difficulties that come with doing your own thing. So it was the right time personally as well, because I was moving back to the UK. I'd done kind of a lot of traveling and was ready to come back and settle down a little bit. And from a professional point of view, I'd worked in print, I'd worked in digital, I'd worked for an agency. I'd kind of taken all those little bits of skill from my previous jobs to be able to adapt to working for myself.
Can you guys? Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Josephine.
I was just gonna add, Eugene, that like, you know, there's really no like perfect time to do anything. And I don't know about you guys, but I know in my experience, when I talk to other friends who've kind of gone through this, everyone kind of says that like you sort of know when the right time, like you kind of have like a feeling that okay, this is like it.
And for you guys, what was it like, you know, the first few days or the first few months of just setting off on your own and calling your own shots? What was that feeling like?
It was a bit of both. It was because when I came back, me and my colleague, who were the first two full-time people to work for MUNDIAL, we had enough to pay us for the next 3 months, and that was it. So we just kind of came in and didn't start looking for work, but we're just doing the work that we'd been given and figuring it out. So there was a bit of pressure hanging over us, I suppose, to kind of ensure that 3 months became 6 months, that became 12 months, that eventually is kind of almost 2 years now. But on the day-to-day, it was a lot more fun because there was no one telling you what to do. And I'm not very good at having a boss, as you know, Eugene. So,
yes.
Yeah, so that was really nice to kind of have confidence in my decisions and know that they weren't going to be second-guessed.
Yeah. And you, Josephine?
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun and really empowering. I actually, like, I quit my job and I was still living in Calgary at the time, and I was doing some freelance stuff, and that's when I decided to actually move out to Toronto. I guess it was empowering because I was able to make that decision and just feel really free. And I'd kind of thought about moving out here, but always come up with like a million reasons why I shouldn't. But in that moment, I don't know, I kind of realized that like there was no better time to do it.
Yeah. And something you alluded to, Dan, was you kind of had a really short runway. You had like 3 months of salary. Did failure ever set in, or like, were you prepared for failure?
No, not really. Yeah. Like I didn't want to go and get another job. I wasn't.
So you knew you were going to make it work somehow?
Not new, but it was, yeah, didn't have a backup plan. It's probably more apt. Yeah, we had to make it work. Well, I mean, we were confident to a degree. You know, if we'd done it 2 years earlier, where MUNDIAL was then, we couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And we knew that we were in a good position and that we had a good brand and it had kind of grown and we had a good fan base and subscribers and all those things. But none of those are guarantees. And you know, like almost 2 years later, there's still, it could go. Not tomorrow. You know, we have a bit of a longer runway. Yeah. You know, but
what was it about the 2 years prior that wouldn't allow you to kind of jump ship and just do it full time? Like, what changed?
We just kind of built a team over that time who became more and more invested in what we were doing. It was, at first, it was favors and friends doing favors for friends. And it was a bigger group, and it kind of gets narrowed down over that period to people who really, really want to do it. And they'll do it if they're getting paid well or they're not getting paid. And that's kind of the team that we have now, almost two and a half years later. So there was 3 or 4 people who were ready to do the same thing that I did and really push and jump ship and do it.
And you, Josephine?
Sorry, what was the question, Eugene?
It's in regards to like the idea of failure. Like, were you ever, did it ever cross your mind, or were you ever prepared to, you know, think what life would be if you failed and you had to like move back or whatever?
I just kept telling myself that. I was like, the worst thing that could happen is that I have to come back and that I am doing the same thing I was doing before, which, to be honest, wasn't even that terrible. I mean, I had a great community of friends. I had my family there. At the time, Calgary's job market was still like pretty decent. So, you know, when the worst case scenario also isn't that bad, it makes it a little bit easier. But at the same time, I was like, kind of like what Dan said, I was like, failure is really not an option. Like, I'm going to like ride this until the wheels fucking fall off.
And for both of you guys, like that, what do you think you've learned about setting off and doing your own thing? Like, were there things about you yourself personally that you kind of uncovered?
Yeah, I suppose you can't, you kind of figure out all the excuses you've been making for yourself when you can tell it to another boss, because you're just letting yourself down. I suppose, you know, oh, I was late today because of this, this, and this, or I can't really do that. Can you give it to someone else? And when it's just you, or it's just you and someone who's going to hold you accountable, because you need to pay their wages at the end of the month, you can't really make those excuses anymore. So that, I mean, that's a great learning process in itself.
Do you think that those experiences helped illuminate some of the decisions you didn't understand when someone was the boss of you? If you know what I'm saying.
I'm not really willing to give them that credit, but yeah.
All right. And then, yeah, for you, Josephine, what do you think were the biggest personal learnings on just setting out and doing your own thing?
I mean, I guess the biggest thing was that you're forced to sort of like look at yourself in a different way, like for all your strengths and all your shortcomings, and sort of try to like address those. But I did also learn that I'm actually like quite interested in business and entrepreneurship. Like I never really thought that I was, but even learning like the financial side of things, that's something that I really had no interest in before, but that's kind of one of my favorite things now. Like I do all of my own taxes, and I like get such a sense of like satisfaction and like accomplishment out of doing that. So I think the working for yourself definitely uncovers different interests you might have never ever thought of.
And when you guys are starting to kind of, I guess, look at everything that sort of defined, you know, your guys' transition, were you guys doing things beforehand, like on the side, like, you know, trying to fill your free time with these passion projects before eventually validating it and getting it into a full-time job? Like, how did you guys go about that? Maybe you can start, Josephine, with some of the things you were pursuing.
Yeah, I was definitely always doing, like DJing for me is still a new thing. It's like new in the last 2 years, but I've been writing on the side since I was in university, like for a long, long time. And so I always kind of did that, even when I was working like my 9 to 5. You know, for a long time, that wasn't even anything that was making any money. It was just, I was writing for local music magazines, going to like shows, doing interviews. I always had a really good response from people about that stuff, even when it was not paid, when it was just a hobby.
Yeah.
And so I kind of always kept it in the back of my head, like, oh, is that something that I could do? And then, yeah, for I would say about 2 years, the last 2 years of me actually working my 9 to 5, I was freelancing on the side, mostly writing stuff.
Yeah. Had you not gone through the process of, you know, pursuing work on the side, that you could have made the full-time jump? Because I think that's the one thing that I hear a lot from creatives that want to go and pursue like these opportunities, is that, you know, oh, I'm, you know, I work a 9 to 5, and then after work, I'm always really tired. For you, Josephine, had you not gone and pursued those opportunities, do you think that you would have had the proper foundation to go out and, you know, make it a full-time thing?
Not at all. And like,
how did you find the energy or the passion to like pursue these things, you know, after your day job?
Yeah. I don't think I would have at all. And I mean, that's not to say that it's not possible, but I think for me personally, being able to sort of like try it out and like dip my feet in a little bit with like what it feels like to make your own money on the side, like that was essential to me. And that's one piece of advice that I always give to people who, you know, ask me like, well, how do I get started? And it's like, well, you just have to start, like just do something, even if it's like one thing a month that's sort of like leading up to that. And that's where I started. Like at the beginning, I was writing, you know, like one piece a month outside of my regular 9 to 5. It's exhausting working a 9 to 5 because, you know, you're in the same place Monday to Friday between these set hours. And when you get home, all you want to do is like lay down and watch The Voice or whatever it is. But
yeah.
I think I always just told myself that it was going to be, because I always had visions of like doing my own thing eventually. I just sort of looked at it as like short-term pain for long-term gain type thing. Like I knew that if I just really hustled and put the work in just for a short time period, that it would pay off. And it did end up. And I was keeping like the most insane schedule for a while there. Like I was waking up at 6 a.m. and then I would do like 2 or 3 hours of like freelance stuff before work. And then I would go to work from 9 to 5 and sometimes work while there on freelance stuff, which is terrible. Don't do that. And then I would come home and then, work for another 4 or 5 hours in the evening. So, and I did that for probably like, I would say maybe like 4 or 5 months of like that type of schedule. So.
And what about you, Dan? How, especially running a full-fledged magazine on top of 9 to 5 can't be easy.
Yeah, I mean, we have been releasing 4 magazines a year for like since 2014, and we still do that despite it only being a full-time job for the past 2 years. So it was kind of pretty full on. I was on a different time zone from the other guys who were working on it, which was quite difficult. But I think the main thing is I enjoyed doing it. Like I really liked producing MUNDIAL. It's still fun, even though it's my job. So that's the most important part. I probably would, I wasn't doing it because, eventually this will become a job. I was doing it because I enjoyed doing it. And I liked getting something back that I was really proud of. And I think that kind of is reflected in the people who have stuck around and are still working for MUNDIAL, or, are on the cusp of coming full-time with us, that these are people who are still doing it around full-time jobs. And it's, you talk about being a passion project and then being a full-time thing, but I don't think that passion project thing ever really goes away. And when it does, you're in the shit, to be honest.
We have one question from Brandon Yu. He has a general question about pitching and pricing. How do you go about looking for work, finding companies you want to work with, and pricing your services? Maybe you want to start with that, Dan? That's probably kind of up your alley.
Yeah, sure. The magazine MUNDIAL works as our front of house. So we take a little bit of advertising on that, but generally it's kind of it's used to show what we can do to brands. It stands on its own editorial, and we produce it because we want to produce it, but it's also a handy kind of selling tool. So it ends up if it ends up on the right desk, people can go, "Oh, can you do what you've done there for them for us?" That's the model. It doesn't necessarily always work like that. Pitching, I've no idea. We've been very fortunate in that a lot of contacts that we've kind of met along the way through various other jobs and kind of friendships have been very kind to us, and we've been part of that process, and we've been given work on the merit of work we've done in the past. Pricing, you just have to value your own time. I think that how much do you need at the end of the month, and what is that per day? That's as simple as it gets. And a little bit of how much is with MUNDIAL is how much is the brand worth, MUNDIAL as a brand worth to these people.
In the beginning, did you have any issues with pricing that you, in retrospect, felt you charged incorrectly, or you lost maybe an opportunity that you probably should have come down in pricing versus one you charged too little?
Mainly too little, because we just wanted to work. But that's kind of a learning curve, right? Yeah, I don't think we've ever charged too much. I don't think anyone's ever signed that off where we thought, fucking, how do we get that money? We're getting better at it, and we're getting better at valuing what we do. But there is an element of kind of trial and error to it.
Yeah. What about you, Josephine?
I mean, just to sort of like echo what Dan said, like most of my work and all the various things that I do, it all comes from referrals or, friends. So yeah. Your network is really everything. I've always thankfully been quite good at meeting people, and even long before I was doing any of this. And, my immediate network were some of the first people that I hit up when I decided to go out on my own and do my own thing, just to let them know and see what was going on out there. The pricing question is really difficult because, especially for me, especially when you're kind of doing like a bunch of different things, it's sometimes hard to know like, how much does this cost? But I always just, again, try to talk to friends who I trust who are doing similar things. And I think that's one thing it's not talked about enough in like the world of freelance. I wish there was more like, transparency and like safe spaces to talk about that stuff, because it is really difficult. But I kind of just did the work backward method that Dan mentioned. Like I thought about like, hey, what do I need every month to like survive, and sort of try to like piecemeal it in there.
Yeah.
Difficult though.
You guys both mentioned networking and just having like a solid network. If someone doesn't necessarily have that network, what do you think are good ways for them to build that network, or to just create a sense of trust with people they meet, et cetera, et cetera?
We kind of mentioned at the start how social media is maybe gets a bad rep. It's a bit vacuous and stuff. That's a great starting point. There's people I've met through social media who have eventually become clients of ours and various other things like that. But I think that there's a bit of a strange misconception that you have to kind of like be business and be ruthless and be like, I've got to get money and all stuff like that. But I think more to the case is like, why don't just start being nice to people? I think that's probably a good starting point, and be genuine and care about what they're doing rather than how much money they're making or things like that. And treat people, whether they're at the very top of a brand or the very top of a business, or they're kind of doing something you want to do, or whether there's someone who's sending you their portfolio for the first time and maybe isn't the best photographer in the world, kind of treat them the same. That's something that gets forgotten a lot in this industry, I think.
Yeah. What about you, Josephine?
Yeah, I think if you don't really know where to start with networking per se, is like, I mean, and I'm speaking especially from like the DJ perspective, because when I came to Toronto, I mean, I knew a few people in the scene, so to speak, but I just went out a lot and tried to like meet a lot of people who were doing the things that I wanted to be doing. And, you know, like going to bars that I knew booked DJs and like seeing what that was like, or trying to meet the manager or trying to meet the DJ. Like I did a lot of that for, you know, the first few months I was here. And I think that that can kind of apply to like any industry. Like if you're a coder, you know, maybe go to like some workshops or like some meetups. There's tons of those that go on. I also think that like the whole co-work culture is something that like I personally, like I don't work in a co-work space, but I know lots of people that do, and they find that that's a really good way to meet people if you're like starting from zero.
Yeah, yeah. And this is something that I think you alluded to before, Josephine, is before when you guys had a kind of a guaranteed paycheck working for somebody, do you guys think your relationship with money has changed now that you're your own boss?
Yeah, I suppose I've had to learn a lot more about money. I'm not very good with it, to be honest, and that's just kind of a personal trait which at 28 probably isn't going to change. But from a professional point of view, sure, yeah, and we're still learning. We're still learning as we go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that actually was surprising to me about when I first, you know, started freelancing full time was that I needed less money on a day-to-day basis than I actually thought I did. Getting out of like the office, I found I was spending a lot less money. Like I wasn't going for lunch every day. I wasn't like going for a coffee once or twice a day. So that was kind of like a bit interesting. But yeah, I definitely think that my relationship with money has changed, and I feel like it's gotten a lot better. I feel like when you don't really know how much money you're going to have or where it's coming from exactly, I think you're just a bit more careful.
Yeah. And you mentioned too, there doesn't seem to be a lot of opportunities to learn about how freelancers, or, you know, being your own boss, you know, that interaction with money. Would you guys agree that there was a lack of like knowledge out there on how you guys should structure, you know, deals, pricing, et cetera, et cetera? And do you guys wish there was more sort of learnings you could derive from a resource or whatever?
I think so, but at the same time, every kind of relationship we have with someone who's giving us money or someone we're working with is unique anyway. So you can, in terms of the nuts and bolts of it, that'd be great. It'd be cool to know that you have to pay tax on a certain date, and if you don't, you're going to go to prison. That would be handy. But in terms of, oh, you should price yourself like this, or I don't think there's any hard and fast rules. Especially with something like what we're doing, where 15 years ago it was very traditional and there was editorial and there was advertising. But as that becomes more fluid, things change, and the idea of a creative agency, or whatever you want to call it, is changing almost on a daily basis here now. So I don't think there's any hard and fast rules, and you have to learn a lot of it on the job. But perhaps some of the basics, that'd be great.
Yeah. Do you guys feel that your work has changed creatively since going full time, and knowing that this is your, you know, your one and only thing? Do you have more time? Is even the mental space you're in, is it more conducive to creating things? Maybe you go, Josephine.
Yeah, for me, definitely, like I feel like I just use my brain in so many more ways that I wasn't before. And I kind of touched on it before, saying that, like, you know, you have to, there's so many more considerations and things you have to learn when you are working for yourself, that maybe it just sort of like opens different parts of your brain that you never thought you had. But yeah, I think I'm more like open now to different possibilities. And there's tons of things that I'm doing now that I never even thought that I would be. Like, I'm pursuing more like radio stuff and broadcast journalism. And that's something that I really never even considered before. But it's an amazing outlet, and it's something that I've realized I want to be part of my life for a long time. So, yeah.
What about you, Dan?
Yeah, in terms of creative output, yeah, it's changed, and it continues to change, just in terms of, because we're such a young company and we've not really figured out what we are yet. We'll do a variety of things, and we'll take on a lot more tasks than a traditional publisher or a traditional creative agency would have. So whether we're doing a national campaign or a very small social media campaign, or producing 4 magazines a year, or producing print for someone, everything's kind of a constant challenge, which is good, and it's a lot more exciting than kind of doing the same thing every single day.
Yeah, I have a question from one of the panelists. From apologies if I pronounce his name incorrectly. I think it's Ashil, and their question is: when developing your brand or company, should opinions of others, such as friends, peers, colleagues, start shaping how you approach your brand or company? It's a great question.
I think if they're not being a dick, yeah. I think there's, like, if they genuinely are trying to help you and think, oh, you should do this way, and if it's a trusted friend, it's great having kind of one person's vision or a couple of people's vision running a company, but like there's no one in the world who can't take some advice once in a while. So yeah, it's great if you should do this differently, and you don't have to take it fully on board, or you can have a chat about it amongst yourselves and think, okay, yeah, he's probably right. Especially if this is someone who's with our audience. Like we always say, we make the magazine for people like us and then people like our friends. So if they don't like it, we're doing something wrong, I think. So that's always good to get feedback. If it's just someone on Twitter saying you're shit, mate, then probably don't listen to that. But if it's someone who you trust and it's some constructive feedback, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Josephine?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I already mentioned that, like, your friends and trusted people are some of the best resources, but I think that you have to sort of keep that advisory council tight and small. You know, if I'm working on something, I try to have like a few people whose opinions I do get, and make sure they're of like varied sort of backgrounds. You know, like if I'm working on a marketing project, it's great to have somebody else who's a marketing person like look at it, but it's also good to have someone who's a bit removed from the situation as well and kind of give their feedback. But try not to ask too many people, because then, you know, you just overloaded with opinions. So, but I think it's definitely a good resource.
Yeah, this actually, you inadvertently sort of alluded to this other question, Dan. So one of the other questions we received from someone anonymous was, how do you deal with sarcastic people? You know, people that are questioning your very decision to go and pursue your own thing and leave, you know, the security of a job. How have you approached that? You know, and how do you make sure that you're maintaining steam or focus and not letting that derail you?
So
has it happened to you?
Yeah,
has it happened to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's people who don't like what we're doing, aren't fans of what we're doing. But then I also think there's if you think you've got a good idea, there's other people out there who think you've got a good idea. You're not the only one who thinks you have. So if people don't like it, and if people are being funny about it, and if people have sarcastic comments to make about it, then it's not for them, and that's fine too. Particularly for us, media and print and stuff, so divided up these days. It's not like we're producing the New York Times, which is meant to be for everyone, or we're producing a mass media product. We're producing something for a specific person, and if it's not for you, that's cool as well. Like, don't follow us on Twitter, don't follow us on Instagram, don't pass comments, don't don't engage with it. I think everyone feels in 2017 the need to engage with stuff, whether they hate it or they love it. And that's part of life, and that's part of social media, I suppose. But in terms of sarcastic comments, which have got no, aren't trying to help anyone, they're just there to be nasty, then you can ignore them. Like it's pointless. What you're producing or what you're doing isn't for that person, and it's fine, because for every one of them, there's another person who's going to love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, not everybody is going to love everything that you do. And that's the case with anything in life. So
do you think that it's about finding out as soon as possible? Because I think that just people, you know, that's a very quick way to derail something. It's like, oh, you know what, like my friends don't even think this is the right thing.
mm-hmm.
All of a sudden it really makes you question, like, you know, is it really just about removing that stream of consciousness?
It's funny because, like, I think especially too with like creative things, like obviously you make stuff for other people to enjoy it. So sometimes it's a bit of like a weird thing to be like, oh, I'm just making what I want. But it's like, yeah, you're making what you want, but you obviously want people to care too. So I don't know. It's a tricky question, but I think that at the end of the day, you just have to know, you just have to be sure with yourself and know that you're doing things for the right reasons. And if you know that, then nothing can really like derail you, but be it your family, friends, or whoever. And people who are just like hating for no reason, I mean, I truly think that people like that are just, you know, projecting some of their own like jealousy or insecurity on you, and you really just can't pay any mind to it.
Yeah, and you know, for both of you guys, obviously, from where you guys were when you first left to pursue these things to now, like obviously you guys have gained traction, right? How would you define that path towards gaining traction? And just like as Dan was saying, is like you just need to, you know, what MUNDIAL does is not for everybody, but how do you find the people that will find value in MUNDIAL? How does Josephine find, you know, the people that will find value in, or find value and how do you find people that will value your music? Like, what is that process for you guys from almost like a marketing component?
I think you work to make what you're doing as good as you possibly can make it. There's nothing's going to be perfect, especially when it comes to print or media or music or films. But you just take a lesson from that. So like we do it issue by issue. We sit down after an issue's done and go, okay, that was good. That didn't quite come off. Let's build on that for the next one. And then if you keep improving that, then more people will like it. Like that's kind of inevitable. That's how you build an audience. You make the next thing you do better than the last. In terms of the basics of building an audience, there's thousands of ways to do it. There's, you know, you've got to go out and research who are the people who are going to buy your product, consume your media, and whatever you're doing. For whatever you're doing, there'll be a different way of reaching those. Well, our social media has been kind of, hugely impactful for us. And that's how we built our audience. We have X amount of followers, but then to convert them to subscribers is another step. So you just kind of have to do it like that. Just keep going, keep plugging away at it. Don't think that you've perfected what you're doing, because you're like 100% haven't. We're nowhere near the magazine or the agency or the brand that we want to be yet. We just have to keep going.
Yeah. What about you, Josephine? How have you gone about, you know, developing all these new gigs as well as radio shows, etc.?
I think that for me, like the consistency has been key, and just sort of like sticking to your guns about what you want to do and what you know, the kind of DJ brand, whoever you want to be known as. And, you know, when I was first starting out, I didn't really have a lot of strategy in that sense. I was just kind of like, oh, I like all these different kinds of music. But I kind of came to a point where I was like, okay, I need to like really like nail down like what do I want people to think of when they think like a JAYEMKAYEM DJ set. And then everything I do, just make sure that it sort of like ladders up to that. So I can see like, you know, you're showing some of my like radio, like flyers, like every radio show that I do, it like sticks to a format so that people can like know that that's what it is and that's what they're going to hear every other week. You know what I mean? Maybe sometimes I don't necessarily like want to do that, but I'm like, this is the product that I'm offering and I got to stick to it. So yeah, consistency for me is key. Eugene, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, to that point about consistency, was there a point in time when you had maybe, you know, a bad month and the kind of made you rethink the whole thing? Like, how did you push through and persevere and maintain consistency in light of maybe things not going so well?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Dan has a better answer for this, but like for me, I just like I'm like a survivor. I just always manage to like keep it going, you know? Like every day I somehow manage to wake up and just keep plugging away. I mean, we all have our off days for sure, but that's the same in anything else. And I think for me too, like just coming from, you know, working in a 9 to 5 and not feeling appreciated and not feeling like I had a lot of like ownership or agency over anything I was doing for the longest time. Like I'm still just so like grateful for every day doing what I'm doing now, that even like the bad days, like I just look back on that and I'm like, okay, wow, like I have like every opportunity right now to like make this what I want it to be. I need to do it.
We just usually just go to the pub if we're having a bad day or a bad week or a bad month. Now it's similar to what Josephine said. I think it's very easy to forget that we're in like a very, very privileged position to be doing what we love doing. I go to work with like my mates every day, which is kind of, you know, say that to almost anyone from my dad's generation. That's bizarre. Go and do something you want to do every day. Go and work with your friends. That's like what a privilege. We've all had crap jobs, you know. Like we've not always been in this position. We've not always worked in media. I think amongst us, there's like, you know, a bin man. I worked in a fact like there's any number of crap jobs we've had. So we have to kind of look back on that and say, yeah, you know, it could be worse. It could be worse. We've had a bad month or we've had a bad day, but like you get to come to work tomorrow and you get to do something that you've created. So like that's great.
Yeah, there's an anonymous question for you, Dan, which I'm actually not familiar with the situation, but since I truly believe that smart people enjoy difficult questions, so MUNDIAL has produced a couple of exclusive products lately, and there's been a bit of a backlash online about the pricing of those products. How do you deal with things about pricing of the physical goods you sell, or just anything you sell?
We're just super confident that we're not ripping anyone off. Like we don't. Like it's not a luxury product. There's no hidden agenda for us. We're not making millions off selling t-shirts or football shirts, that's for sure. We just do the math. And like the La Haine thing that was on screen earlier, that's embroidered in the UK. It's a Nike football shirt, which when Chelsea make them or Spurs make them in tens and millions, it costs 90 pounds. We were charging 70 for ours because we were embroidering them in the UK. And we were making maybe 100 of them. So there's no like, I don't feel the need to leap to our own defense on stuff like that, because we're not like, it's not, you know, we're not all going home to mansions and speedboats. It is what it is.
Yeah. And this is the exact product where the backlash occurred, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's cool. And like, I grew up wanting stuff that I couldn't afford, and I have a great deal of sympathy for people who want something and can't afford it. I really do. There's still a shitload of stuff that I want that I can't afford, but we can't charge any less for that, and we have to make money. We are a business. Like there has to be an element of profit to it. Otherwise I'll have to go and work for someone else again, and we also have that turned up.
Yeah. There's another question from Rainer. When you guys started building your brand and company, did you guys have any mentors that guided you or still guide you?
This is like actually something I was thinking about the other day. Like, I wish I had considered this more when I first was getting started. Like, I still don't really have anybody that I consider to be my mentor. Like, I have, you know, a lot of great friends who have been amazingly supportive and given a lot of good advice. But in terms of that, you know, one key person who has really helped me sort of plot out my career or think about the kind of person I want to be or what I want to offer, like, I don't have that one person, and it's something that I feel like is really missing for me.
Do you think that makes you want to also, you know, lend your mentorship to someone?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I get like a lot of emails, and I try to answer all of them, like just from strangers like asking me for advice. So I try to do what I can, but I'm still actively looking for a mentor. So
Yeah. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been people. It's not in some like goodwill hunting, arm around the shoulder kind of way, but yeah, there's been friends who've been there and done that and kind of gone, this is how you do it, and guided us through a tricky first few years. Yeah, like I don't want to embarrass them by saying who they are, but there's definitely people in several industries who've really helped and are there to give me advice to this day if I need it, whether it's personal or professional. And that kind of, it plays into that thing I said earlier, which was that like just be nice, like, because I was just some fucking scally kid who was coming to London and wanted to write about trainers, and people looked after me and gave me free stuff, and then that became a personal and professional relationship later because I was nice to them and they were nice back to me. And in terms of wanting to or like something that we would offer, mentorship, MUNDIAL, we try and do that. We take on a lot of young writers, we take on interns all the time. We try and pay them as well, which is still a very rare thing in this industry. But yeah, no, because it was less than 5 years ago that I was in their position, so I'm very happy to help.
Cool, thanks. I have another question from Makenta. Do you have any suggestions for being an entrepreneur who works in multidisciplinary fields in terms of making sure your brand is consistent while doing things in different realms? I think this is a good question, especially maybe someone like Josephine who can comment on whether it's writing, how do you brand yourself as a writer slash DJ, for example?
yeah, I think that this is a really good question. It's something that I think about a lot and I'm still kind of like working through, but I'm lucky in that my interests all kind of do have a bit of overlap. You know, obviously, like being a music writer is helpful when you're also a DJ, because while you're like looking for music or fielding submissions, you can kind of then work that music into like the sets that you do live or your radio shows. So I think that sort of just trying to like find those places where there's some overlap. I mean, I know that that's kind of very vague, but depending on what your interests are, would be a good place to start. But I think it is kind of like, if they're completely opposite, then that's obviously going to be a bit more difficult. But yeah, for me, I definitely try to, you know, even in like the things that I do, like as a writer, I try to sort of mirror that with my DJing and vice versa. If it's like maybe the element of like discovery is something that I'm really passionate about in the writing that I do, but then also my work as a DJ. So maybe it's like something like that, like one guiding principle that you can kind of feed into many different columns.
And how about you, Dan?
Yeah, I think Josephine's right. I think there needs to be an element of focus, even if it's just like literally a pinpoint in your interests or something that you're really passionate about. And I still occasionally freelance on other subjects and write for other websites about fashion, menswear, sportswear, whatever. But kind of the thing that ties all that together is football, and that's why I think that's why Mundial's been the one thing that's been successful. The thread that's gone through it is because like I'm super passionate about it, and everyone who works for us is. So if you can find that one thing you care about that ties a few of your things together, then you're in a far stronger position, I think.
We're kind of winding down here, so I just have one or two more questions for you guys. If you guys were to define a characteristic that you think would set someone up best for success as a freelancer, entrepreneur, what do you think it would be?
Stubbornness, I think. I think that that's the reason I couldn't carry on in the job I wanted to do, because I wasn't getting my own way. That's the reason we work so hard, because everyone here is kind of similarly stubborn. Is, well, no, that's not quite good enough. We need to make that better. So, oh, we can't do that. We have to. Like, there's a element of like you have to make it as good as you can in everything we do. So it's stubbornness, but not to the point of it absolutely blowing up your career, I suppose. Like, don't be nasty with it, but be confident in your ideas, and if it's your idea, stick with it.
Yeah, for me, I think, just having a thick skin and sticking to your guns, because you're probably going to hear no a lot more than you're going to say yes. Sorry. And it's funny because I think that like that stubbornness that Dan talked about in my old life, in my old job, when I was working in a corporate job, it was like something that was seen as like an undesirable quality. But then you kind of get out into this world and it's actually, it's good. It's like it'll do you well to be like a bit stubborn and to be able to like stand your ground. So
Do you guys think that's a learned trait that someone that maybe isn't stubborn could pick up on? Is it about identifying something they truly care about, or what is it exactly? Or is it just basically you're either built for it or you're not?
No, I don't think that's the case. I don't think there's this mold of an entrepreneur. Like, however much Netflix tries to shoehorn people into that with the documentary, like, look, this entrepreneur, he's got really nice glasses and a black t-shirt. That's the only way you can be an entrepreneur. That's not the case at all. Whether you want to open a really small coffee shop or build the world's biggest computer, you're going to be very different people. And no, you don't have to be in a mold to do it. Like, the guy Yvon Chouinard who does Patagonia isn't the same as Bill Gates. Like, they're different people. So no, you can be different. I think just that you got to be headstrong with your ideas. You've got to have belief in your ideas, and you can do that politely, or you can be an absolute dickhead about it and be successful either way.
sorry. Yeah, I think that it is a learned trait, and I think that, many of us, all of us panelists and all the people watching, a lot of us we still don't know the things that we're capable of, you know what I mean? So I think that if you feel like you're maybe a meek person, you don't have that stubbornness, it just takes the right thing to bring it out of you.
Cool. So I have actually a few more questions just kind of funneled in towards the end here. One of them being, at this point, both of you seem to have found your passion and are fortunate enough to be making a living off of doing your own thing. How do you scale from this point? Is there a way to expand what you do to involve even more people or impact more people? Maybe you can start with that one, Dan.
Yeah, I think we're in quite a fortunate situation in that football's the biggest sport on the planet. It's international. It's you don't necessarily need to tie yourself to a language. We're popular kind of across Europe and the US and stuff. In terms of scaling it, we're in the process of doing that at the minute, which we've got a Japanese title coming out hopefully, and it's just about finding those people across the world who've got the same passion, and then figuring out how your tone of voice or how your language or how you present your work translates to them. So we have a core readership of kind of people who really love print product, but that's a finite number of people. So we need to translate that tone of voice to digital at some point. We need to think about the people who only consume video, or the people who only consume on their mobile, or the people who only read Japanese, for example. It's the passion point doesn't change. I think that they still love football in the same way that we love football. They still really interact with it in the same way. It's just a language thing or a technology thing that it's our responsibility to reach them.
Got it. There's two more questions here, and we'll cap it after these two. One is from Chris. Do you have any advice for working on a side gig when you're in a situation where the day job is hostile towards that? For example, in terms of employment contracts at creative jobs that forbid earning money on the side. Do you want to start with that one, Dan?
Yeah, sure. That's tough. It's difficult. Yeah, I think Josephine said earlier, and I did the same kind of at my previous job. I was probably shouldn't have, but was working on MUNDIAL in the daytime when I was meant to be writing about basketball shoes. But I don't know. I think maybe you have to take the leap a little earlier. I think if you're already in a creative industry, and people are stopping you from doing that work, aside from spending your evenings and your weekends and stuff like that, which is I'd say is a given. I still do that now. I don't see that stopping at any point soon. I think you just need to figure out a way around it, and that may have to be leaving that job that's stopping you from doing it.
What about you, Josephine?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing as Dan. I think there's those kind of moments where you're like, and we talked about this early on in our conversation, those like moments that feel like it's sort of pushing you a certain way. And I think if that's the case, you have to leave earlier than maybe you thought you would, because nothing should really stop you from doing what makes you happy.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, one thing when I first moved out to Toronto, like, I was really prepared, like, okay, if this all goes to shit, like I'm gonna work at like Starbucks or something like that in the meantime, you know what I mean? And maybe that's what you need to do in order to sort of like get that other side stuff going, and just be prepared to like do whatever it takes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to add my 2 cents. I think it's really unfortunate when jobs are stifling, the interests of their own people, because I think at the end of the day, like, that inherently creates a sense of engagement, right? Having the opportunity to pursue a passion project and having your company support, hey, you know what, we support you, assuming it's not something competitive and whatnot. But I think it's honestly misguided to do that, because I've seen instances where good people have, instead of being supported by their company, they just end up leaving, and I think you kind of leave a bad taste in the mouth of that employee that's exiting, as well as you lose what is, a good person. But one more question from Anonymous, and we can cap things off here. Who or what is one thing, whether it's an artist, company, or product, that you're particularly excited about today and want people to know about?
MAEKAN.
Nah.
Not MAEKAN.
It's not MAEKAN.
Keeping it real, Dan. That's
I
like you.
I mean, you're totally fine. Like, yeah.
I don't need a shout out. It's cool.
I'm just joking. Wait, I have an answer. I realized.
Yeah, give a real answer.
The radio station that I have my show on, Radar Radio, is like something that I'm really proud to be associated with, and I think they're just doing really cool things. They're based in London, England, but they are, obviously reaching out to different hosts and DJs all around the world like myself. And yeah, I just think that there's an opportunity there. Like in 20 years or something, people will look back and be like, oh, that was like a time, like when Radar was first starting. So I encourage music fans to check them out.
Awesome. And you, Dan?
I think Victory magazine is the best magazine in the world by some distance. I think they're amazing. Yeah. To do a multi-sport magazine in 2017 can't be easy, because everything's about specifics and niche interests. I think the guys who we share an office space with, Copa 90, are completely reinventing how people consume football. I don't think kind of on TV highlights will exist in 10 years because of the work these guys are doing here. And the one I mentioned earlier, I think one that I've liked for a very long time is one that I take kind of a lot of inspiration from is Patagonia. I think what they do and how they go about their business and how they do it in a kind of ethical manner, and the way they treat their employees and all things like that, despite being a multi-billion-dollar company, is really refreshing.
Nice. Well, that wraps up today's MAEKAN session. Thanks a lot for your time, Dan and Josephine. And I have to make this small note. We started, I think we peaked at around 36 or 37 attendees, and it's over an hour in and there's still 31 attendees. So that's kudos for you guys for keeping people engaged. Yeah. If you guys would like to hear more about MAEKAN and our membership opportunities, head over to maekan.com and sign up for a trial today. Check it out. I know that Charisse is not on camera, but shout outs to her. She did a great job of organizing everything, the visuals, getting Dan and Josephine sorted. And she's already working on next month's MAEKAN session, which I'm really looking forward to, which hopefully, if things go well, it'll pertain to what's the purpose or value of institutionalized education versus going and doing things on your own. So, what value does school have in this current day and age when, there's so many things you can learn on your own. So yeah, that wraps everything. Thanks a lot for joining, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Take care.
Thanks,
Cheers.
guys.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.